wheat's kind of just the go-to plant to grow. And then tobacco plant. If anybody's out there that grows tobacco, because I looked into it a little bit, will know that you grow tobacco kind of the same way you'll grow tomato plants.
Right.
That you have to have like the right condition of soil. You have to have, the right humidity, or not humidity, but moisture, watering it and everything.
Right, yeah.
And so around middle to south of the country in the United States is perfect conditions to grow tomato plants. And so what else to grow but tobacco plants? And tobacco is a very high profitable avenue.
Yeah.
And especially back then too, is a very high profitable avenue. So anyway, go to the Civil War. Biggest plantations there were cotton and tobacco.
Yep. Yeah.
Matter of fact, most likely if the Confederacy would have won and kept a separate, or if they stayed as a separate country to the United States, they would sufficiently survive just on tobacco alone.
Yeah.
In sales.
Yep.
Not to mention cotton. I mean, cotton would make them rich. Tobacco would make them survive.
Yeah.
And then fast forward to closer to the turn of the century, where the first big cigarette companies start.
Yeah.
This is where these big, because cigarettes have been around for a long time beforehand as well. But all it was tobacco and paper.
Yeah.
Or tobacco paper and sometimes a filter, depending on who's making it. There's small-time tobacco companies kind of start up here and there.
Yeah, yeah.
But you don't really hear of big tobacco companies starting up. As a matter of fact, there has been older big companies, tobacco companies, that have been bought out by Marlboro.
Marlboro, yeah.
Marlboro. It shows you how much I know about, like, soaking cigarettes.
Yeah. By the way, neither of us smoke cigarettes, never have, and neither of us plan on ever, so we really don't know a whole lot in that regard.
Matter of fact, chewing tobacco companies have been around longer than cigarette companies.
Yeah.
Cigars, there hasn't really been like a big company of cigars. It's just more of a small company that makes it and just distribution of it as much as possible. It's mostly distribution area that tends to be a bigger part when it comes to cigars anyway.
Well, no, there are actually some very, very large cigar companies. General Cigars owns a lot of the cigar industry today.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, they own several other smaller brands. And then you have your heritage brands, which are like your family-owned businesses. They've been around forever. They're the cigars that our grandfathers and great-grandfathers smoked. And then more recently, you have your boutique cigars,
CAO,
which are more like your small-time beer companies, your local beer companies, your microbrewed beer companies that aren't quite as large as your big domestics. Mm-hmm. And those boutique cigars usually tend to be smaller batches at a time. And so you do actually have some large companies. The heritage companies of cigars are usually the biggest ones.
Yeah.
They can actually tend to be fairly large.
See, I learned something new now today. So the first cigarette company that I shouldn't say first. The oldest cigarette company nowadays, what do you think it is?
Oh, like the one that's been around the longest, that's still around?
Yeah.
I would say... Oh, what is it? I don't know. Tell me.
Camel.
Okay, yeah.
Camel cigarettes have been around the longest.
Makes sense.
They were founded back in 1913. Now, obviously, like I said, there were big tobacco companies before them. They got bought out by both Camel and Marlboro.
Yeah.
And it was around this time where they wanted to sell as much as possible to people. And this is kind of right at the edge of kind of like closer to the end of First World War, when they were starting to do that. And they were wanting to advertise as much as possible because the Great Depression, they're always hearing about the Great Depression hitting, getting closer, stuff like that. Yeah. Just like you hear nowadays, you always hear, oh, there's going to be some depression coming or
market
something.
Market crash,
yeah.
whatnot, yeah.
They've had those stories back then before their market crash happened. And so they were trying to figure out ways to sell as much as possible and go. Camel was the first one to make big ads into the public.
Mass-produced ads.
Yeah. When it comes to cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe in the local paper you'll see, or back then anyway, the local paper you'll see like your local cigarette companies or your local tobacco companies posting something out.
Right.
But then...
Yeah, Camel was the first one to start.
Camel was the first one to actually put it in
countrywide.
Countrywide.
Yeah.
And so they would advertise the best Turkish blend and that.
Right.
And this was before they started putting extra additives in it.
Right.
It wasn't until after World War II that tobacco companies started putting other additives. Mostly, it started out with mostly preservatives.
Yeah.
That being said...
To keep the cigarettes fresher, for lack of a better term, longer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That being said, nicotine is naturally found in tobacco.
Yes. Nicotine is
not
an additive.
No.
It's naturally produced.
All that nicotine is pretty much a... best way to say it is it's kind of like an accelerant type of thing.
Yeah.
Makes your chemical balance go faster, in a sense.
Yeah.
And so that's something that's a chemical found naturally in tobacco. You'll find it in cigars. You'll find it in pipes. It's natural in tobacco.
Anything that has tobacco will have nicotine. And I promise everybody, I know we're talking about cigarettes and stuff right now, and we're cigar and pipe tobacco guys, but I promise this will get to a point eventually. It is important to reach our final point here, so just
exactly.
Bear with us.
So, a matter of fact, the first bigger cigar issue is about coming up here.
Yeah.
Before any massive regulations even started on cigarettes of that. I guess a little bit of regulation started on there, because FDA was founded beforehand, and the FDA, the Federal Department of Agriculture, obviously keeps control of anything that's sold to the public that's agriculturally based.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I guess, some regulation was put on tobacco and that for that, but nothing really serious. It was like the same regulation you'd put on wheat or corn or oats and stuff like that.
Right. There were no major regulations.
So then comes tobacco companies actually putting other additives, other helpful, addictive additives in it.
Correct.
because they noticed that nicotine was such a addictive substance
Yeah.
that people would tend to buy more and more and more nicotine or more cigarettes because of the nicotine alone. They thought, how can we optimize this more?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's add this chemical that boosts the nicotine, or not nicotine content, but boosts the nicotine's effect, and keep on riding this train as much as we can.
Yeah.
That caught an eye with some federal companies and that, but it wasn't really like a massive thing.
Still wasn't quite a big deal yet.
But nevertheless, that's kind of an eye catcher.
Right.
Then comes the big thing that happened to cigars, and it's the Cuban embargo.
Cuban embargo, correct.
Cuba is one of the number one places that people think about when it comes to cigars.
Right. When somebody thinks about cigars, most of the time they immediately think about Cuba, Cuban cigars.
Now,
Most easily recognized thing about cigars is Cuba.
exactly. That's a big export for Cuba. Places that don't have the embargo, or didn't have the embargo on Cuba, bought cigars on a regular basis. That's like their major export.
Right.
That and rum. Rum was another bigger export for them.
Check out the awesome burn on this. Very nice and even. This is going very, very well. You're still doing good. You're well into the
Almost
first
half.
You're well into the first third there. Still going well.
Still going well. Still getting those same flavors. And like you said, the spices flavors.
Yeah.
Not necessarily like
Not spicy.
peppery or
not-
spicy,
not
but
but more cooking.
more cooking spices.
Spices, yeah.
Anyway, that was a big detrimental thing to the cigar industry. I wouldn't say it was so detrimental that like destroyed half the business, but like it hurt bad.
Yeah.
To the point where like it boosted sales from the Dominican Republic
Yeah. Dominican Republic, yeah.
and Honduras and the other Hispanic countries down there. It launched their sales of their cigar companies because they were the only places that would have that style of a leaf that was grown in Cuba
Right.
to actually make a close enough imitation to Cuban cigars.
Well, another thing is, and I don't know if you know this or not, Tim, but once the embargo happened, it, like you said, it hurt the cigar industry so much that a lot of those well-established Cuban family-based companies actually moved, and they took their businesses to Dominican Republic, to Honduras,
Brazil.
to Nicaragua. So they actually up and moved to these other countries that didn't have these embargoes and started up again. So
Right, so the Cuban embargo happens, and then wonderful, and I say this ironically, horrendously, discovery of cancer, lung cancer, is discovered.
right.
Because of the discovery of lung cancer, which is a horrible, horrible issue.
Oh yeah.
They try finding things that cause lung cancer because they don't want, citizens dying from this.
Right.
Like, no one wants to die from cancer.
No.
I mean, even talking to people, there's those people that you hate so much, it's like, I wish you'd die. I would never say to someone, I wish you'd die of cancer.
Yeah, I
'Cause that's shit.
Yeah, you don't ever wish cancer upon anybody. That is some seriously nasty shit, and it's just not cool.
So they tried to discover all these things that cause cancer.
Yeah.
And come to find out that these additives that they're putting in cigarettes are
The cause
the cause of
lung cancer.
lung cancer.
Yeah.
And it's not the preservatives. Don't get me wrong, because some of the preservatives that they put in cigarettes